Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Colin Landforce. He's the Chief Operations Officer at Unrivaled. Colin Landforce, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thanks for agreeing to come on. I love Twitter, man. The cannabis community within Twitter is strong, and it's what enabled us to have this conversation today, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing how things fall together on there.
It is. It is. Yeah, I've been following you as of recently, and you're putting a lot of great content out there, man. And I noticed today, actually, speaking of Twitter, that you tweeted it. Did you have a podcast earlier today? So is this number two?
This is number two. I think I got several inquiries a while ago. I was flaky about them, and when about the time that I followed up with you, I was like, man, I need to do this. And so I just stacked them in.
Get yourself out there, right?
Yep, absolutely.
You're part of the communication education tribe out there, which is desperately needed due to the 100 years of prohibition that this plant has endured.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that you're on, because I get you're fresh now. You've already had your conversation, so we're gonna have fun today, man.
Yeah.
So 5 years in recreational cannabis. But I guess 5 years might as well be 20 years in the cannabis industry, because the years are like light year, like decades, right? And everything changes so fast. So tell us a little bit about, your background, when you got started, how you got started, and what's led you to be where you're at this point in life.
Yeah. So I think lifelong serial entrepreneur. And like I mentioned to you pre-show, found myself spending a lot of time around regulated consumer goods. So for whatever reason, that was FDA regulated skincare and cosmetics. It was firearms. It was drones. And then stumbled into cannabis kind of in that sequence. And the origin story there is some of my buddies from really like elementary, middle, and high school were getting into the space when it was still medical here in Oregon. And as I had one thing wrapping up and jumped aboard, and the rest is history, as they say. So back in those days, we were just flipping packs under medical. And shortly thereafter, rec happened in Oregon. And then we started making products and into CPG as it goes.
Wow. And so, when that was all taken off, before you actually entered the space as an operator, did you have any prior experience with cannabis before? Like, did you consume or not so much?
Yeah. I mean, when I think back, you realize that, like, yes, since I was 15 or whatever, sorry, mom. Right. So both, like, as a user, as many kids, I think my dad kind of made my way for me when my first car was a Volkswagen double slug bug. He made those decisions in terms of who I was in high school, but and then through the medical, Oregon and California have had medical programs for 20, 25 years at this point. And I certainly dabbled in cultivation on that side back in the old days. I wouldn't call it, it was, the garage, the basement, that kind of setup. And then professionally, things worked their way back around full circle to where they are now.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. So in that 5 years that you've been, heavily focused in the space, like we joked about earlier about how fast things evolve and change, but like, realistically, what have you seen? Like, has it just been so fast, and really what has surprised you throughout that whole process?
Yeah, I think like one of the toughest part of it is just the variability. I think it's agriculture at the end of the day, but then the fact that you have this specific sector of agriculture that's pretty much been hidden until very, very recently just makes every step of the supply chain that much more volatile and all over the place. And as we know, with consumer packaged goods, like, the consistency is the name of the game, right? So that certainly adds several layers to everything we do, and is probably the most exciting part of it. You add to that the fragmented state regulation, and you're in Texas, so I guess I can't speak to Texas, but every single state, I think the trickiest part about it is the similar but different, right?
Mm-hmm.
That defines our lives every day. Everything is very similar and totally different at the same time, and no shortage of challenges.
And why do you think that's similar but different has kind of come about? Like, because when I sit back, I kind of see, the state level adoption, more states coming online with adult use. But it seems like there's like a lot that other states that are preparing to go adult use could learn from the states that have and or have been operating for many years. So is that why it's similar but different? Because maybe they adopt some things but then do other things their way, or
Yeah, and I think in a lot of cases, at least this is how it appears, they're just kind of everybody's making it up. Everybody's reinventing the wheel, at least to a certain degree. And I think, the beauty of states' rights is that like there can be states that take this step before anybody else does. It would be simpler if at the federal level they were like, look, here's the rules, play ball.
right.
But you
I
get the
mean, they're
sense
the
that,
ones who got us into this mess, right? I
right,
mean,
yeah,
it
yeah.
makes sense that they would do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of nuance, and so a swatch of regulation rolls out, and I know for us in the beginning, it was as if the wholesale space of the industry was just not addressed particularly in the rules. It was in broad strokes, but like so many use cases that it's like they just didn't think of this. And that's no knock to them. There's hundreds of pages of rules. You can't possibly get anything.
Sure.
But when you're also like, making it up from scratch as state X, I would imagine that's difficult.
And with those nuances and with kind of making stuff up as they're going because it's so new, have you seen that states specifically like Oregon and maybe others that you've worked in where the elected officials have been open to recommendations from the actual operators of the industry?
Yeah, very much so. We just know how long those things take. I'm no expert in this realm. I'll probably say that again while we're talking about it, but the cadence that recommendation, no matter how much they like it, it's just, we're talking 12 months, 18 months, like best case. Right. So I think that makes it clunky, right? When there's obvious things, everybody's on the same page. Great. We'll see you after Christmas or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and like with that kind of holding pattern that we're in some cases or most cases within this industry right now, we continually hear Chuck Schumer's regular tweet about shortly soon comprehensive bill is coming that he's going to be presenting for legalization of cannabis. But we're seeing that really the states are the ones that are driving this, right? Connecticut, I think, this week just became the 17th state.
Today, I think.
Today,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, like at the federal level, what are your thoughts, Colin? Like, what's happening up there? Is it too complex for these policymakers to wrap their heads around that they're really just kind of trying to do their due diligence and figured it out? Is it not priority for them at the moment? Like, what do you think's going on?
Yeah. Well, we're batting a little bit out of my league on this stuff, but I think in general, like because of the layers and the nuance involved in lawmaking, as well as like taking something that was previously or that currently is completely federally legal, and what that means. I think one of the obvious places that my head goes is all of the people that are incarcerated for these related things, right? Legalizing federally opens up all that, and of course it should be open, but it's certainly not simple and straightforward. So I think I would imagine that those are some of the logistics being worked through. I'd imagine they're also working on much less important things, if you ask me or you, but that's for them to decide. But I think that I don't think it's too far out. Like I said, far from an expert on this realm, but
Sure.
I would hope that it's in the next couple years here. And I'm excited for what that means for us here on the West Coast as it really opens up.
Well, I think that's fair, man. I appreciate, you being transparent in that way. So let's bring it back to Oregon then. So like, what have you seen that the state of Oregon has done well in terms of its regulatory framework for cannabis? and even kind of what you touched on, maybe in terms of addressing a racial injustice and people that have been, locked up from cannabis prohibition.
Yeah, I've written about this. I think it's interesting, kind of in the same vein as states' rights. A lot of the equity programs are at the county or city level, and so I'm a little bit in tune with the Portland ones. That's where I'm based, as well as some of the ones in the municipalities in California, where we have a footprint. It's another thing where there's some good stuff in place, and I don't think it does anybody any service with the fact that these things have to be addressed at such a micro scale, because it's like there's probably 300 of these programs, and so if I'm somebody who's in that position looking to take advantage of that, I'm not, but you get what I'm saying. If I'm someone looking to leverage an equity program to start a business, like there's a lot of places to look, which doesn't, like I said, doesn't lend itself to accessibility. But I don't know. It's one of these things. It's like it's a necessary evil to deal with these types of problems as this becomes legal, and it's just growing pains, I think, of the market on a whole.
It definitely is. I mean, it's the unintended consequences of prohibition and the fact that all these different issues are intertwined and integrated with the plant
Yep.
overall. And
Yep.
so it is going to be complex. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of putting heads together to figure it out. But like you said, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we're just excited, I know, as an industry to see when that all and how it plays out.
Yep. Yep.
So let's switch gears and talk about what your role. You're the chief operating officer at Unrivaled. It's a multi-state operator and parent company to multiple different brands that operate in multiple states. So, Colin, give us an overview of the company, your role, and the overall mission that you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Unrivaled is our holdco, our parents, our umbrella, if you will. And so, within there, we have several assets and brands. I'll start with brands because that's some of the stuff I work most closely with. So, Crova is our 800-pound gorilla. For anybody in the California market, there's no way that you're not familiar. I think by the numbers, top 5 brand in California. Year in and year out, and then now making some big waves in Oregon with our efforts here over the last 18 months. And it's a top shelf brand. It's super deeply embedded in the culture, and really Crova is like one of the things I'm most excited about for us going forward with everything going on. And then past that, we have Sticks. Sticks is a value brand. I think about it as being like our Bud Light. So it's all sun-grown material. It's accessibly priced, but it's solid. Solid is the word I would use, right? It's not incredible weed. It's also not duff, and it's kind of the perfect throw it in the backpack for a road trip kind of SKUs, and that's in every category as well. Pre-roll, flower, cartridges, kind of the usual suspects. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Cabana. Cabana is a premium leaning. Again, flower pre-rolls. We haven't extended it past that. Just from a fit perspective, we like the play there. And we've also got a fourth that's a little bit on ice right now. We'll see if it comes forth, but probably not worth mentioning. And then outside of brands, so we have 3 retail stores, 1 in Southern California, 2 in Northern California. We also just entered into agreement to acquire a delivery service based in Sacramento. That'll be a big addition to the portfolio. And then we have indoor cultivation in Northern California and outdoor and greenhouse cultivation in Southern Oregon. Wow. We've also got licensing partners in Arizona and Oklahoma, and seems like I'm probably missing something, but that's a quick rundown.
No, that's a great overview. And from my understanding, it's 4 states that you currently operate in, right? California, Oregon, Arizona, and Oklahoma.
Arizona and Oklahoma, we have a licensing partner. So we have a partner there that's had Crova live there for years now, and I believe we're coming up on Sticks going live there as well.
Got you. So while you've laid out the company and its brands, what is the overall mission for Unrivaled? Like, what is your main focus? and then tell us a little bit of how you're navigating, to achieve that mission within the current landscape of the cannabis CPG market.
Yeah. So I think that can be a tricky question to answer when, you've gone through a couple rounds of M&A like we have now. But I think that really for us, like the MSO landscape is dominated by, well, two things. One, companies with really fragmented assets in terms of being all over the place, as well as people out east in limited licensed states, right? And so I'm excited to be the West Coast MSO. There are a few people in the country, or a few companies in the country, that right now could take your brand, Kevin, and launch it into 1,000 retailers up and down the West Coast, right? You're talking to one of them. That's an exciting value proposition to me, both for like what we're doing every day, as well as to the market as we go public here coming up soon, and all that good stuff. So that, and then leaning into the culture, right? I think another thing, again, that is really rampant is a marketing agency that comes up with an avatar of a consumer customer, or of a cannabis consumer that hypothetically might smoke weed. They're a soccer mom, and look, like, marijuana is normal now, right? And like for us, it's like, cool, we're gonna focus on the people that are weed users. They smoke weed every single day. They smoke it because they want to get high. They're not embarrassed about it. They're not hiding it from their neighbors. Nothing, right? And so
lifestyle users, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that, and that is, that's what Corova is, right? Corova is entrenched in the culture, and that's what that's something that we're really leaning into, right? Again, lots of people are attacking this hypothetical super light user. I think it's a much simpler approach. We're not selling insurance to the homeless. We are just going to go ahead and sell weed to people that want weed.
I've never heard it put that way, but it makes a lot of sense. And those people, I think that the new consumers that are going to be entering soon, once this becomes more, accepted and federally legal, is that, like, I don't know if everybody's going to run right to flower, right? I mean, and that's really who the main smokers are, the people that have the legacy smokers, the ones who really enjoy a good high, like the everyday user, right? I mean,
right.
There's an affinity for flower. So in some cases, my guess or my prediction would be that new consumer entrants, may start with edibles, or may start with something else. But I don't know. That's just me. But I get what your point about Corova, and how it is that lifestyle brand, and how well it's performing in California, because really that is the culture in California, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, taking that a step further, like, I don't know, what's the biggest cannabis brand period in the United States? There are a lot of ways there are a lot of like definitions.
I'm in Texas.
Yeah,
so I'm
right.
I'm just thinking of like, all the publicly traded companies, like the parent companies brands, right? You've got Caliva and the Bob Marley brand. I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask.
So I mean, I would argue that it's probably Cookies, right?
Cookies. That's right. Okay, there's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Caliva is a big player, but like I would argue that it's Cookies, and Cookies is selling weed to people that smoke weed.
Right.
Like,
right.
like they're not trying to get too cute about it. And I don't know. That's where my head is. That's where our head is. And I'm excited to have Corova kind of leading the charge on that front.
Yes, just keep it simple. Stick to your core competency, right?
Yep.
And your main audience. That makes so much sense. So you mentioned MSOs. So let's talk about like MSOs, more broadly. So, we're starting to see kind of, the movers and shakers, right, within the exchange, the Canadian exchange. You mentioned that y'all are about to go public, so I don't know how much you can talk about that, but just give me give the audience just an overview of kind of the MSO landscape, and where Unrivaled fits in once y'all do go public.
Yeah, so we are executing a 50-50 merger with TerraTech, TRTC, which is on the OTC. And so we announced that in March, end of March, can't remember exactly. So that's continued to come together. And like you said, I'm excited to kind of be on the biggest playing field, if you will. And I think for a lot of people, right? I'm in Oregon. I'm based in Oregon, and I've spent a lot of my time up until a couple of years ago in the Oregon bubble. And I think that the perception of MSO, especially out here, is a lot of these players are out east. There's not a huge presence until very recently on the West Coast there of MSOs. Sorry, and so I'm excited to make noise in that space, particularly, and doing so outside of the conglomerate of a bunch of businesses mashed together on a spreadsheet, and do so in a really cohesive way. Something that has been an absolute battle that we've been working on for years is all of our distro hubs are doing the same things, running the same processes. It's the same brands for sale, the same product lines, right? The joys of like having the different compliance is a different conversation, but cohesive single operation that then jumps the hurdles of each state's compliance is kind of what we're going for. And I'm excited to have that position going up against everybody else.
Yeah, that's really exciting, man. I mean, and you mentioned that is the big stage. I mean, US cannabis, a lot of people, of course, talk about Canadian LPs, or at least they did uh, back in 2018 and even before, because, obviously Canada was the first G7 nation to fully legalize, right? And
Right.
so, but as we're learning more and more that there are multi-state operators that are performing at a very high level and generating revenue and actually cash positive.
Yeah,
so.
there's businesses now. Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. That's a relatively recent thing in the space in general, right?
It is, absolutely. Yeah. So okay, outside of MSOs, and there's been articles and even news reports talking about this, and I want to get your take on it. Like, where does the small business fit in, or even do they at this point? For the small operators, how does that shake out now that the industry is becoming more mature, even without federal legalization?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a massive place for it, and I think that again in the like largely East Coast, which is a lot of limited license states, probably not much there, right? Because of what that landscape ends up looking like and what it takes to get said license. But in Oregon and California, I'm a little less familiar with Washington regulation. I know Oklahoma is pretty wide open too. There obviously will be big players, but I mean, I'm continually impressed by the number of just independent, like you said, small businesses that keep it pushing, both like in terms of brands and growers, as well as at the retail level. But I think that it's probably the climate on the East and the West is just so different that, like, I don't know, it's another thing that makes this interesting, right? Like, just when I read about the number, is it Florida, like 14 licenses or something ridiculous? Like,
it's crazy.
Like what kind of racket? Pardon me. I don't want to. What kind of racket are we running over there? Like, goodness.
They have a very comprehensive medical program, Colin.
Yeah,
come on,
yeah.
And it's funny because you talk about the climate on the East Coast and the West Coast, and then just like I was laughing at myself earlier, you asked me like the best brand. I'm in Texas, and I'm like, we've got no climate. We kind of are just watching from the outside and checking it all out, So it's such a weird dynamic that the country's in right now.
Yeah.
Due to federal prohibition.
Yeah. I mean, and riffing on that for a sec, some of the stuff I post on Twitter, it's like that gets in front of people in the South, and it's like it could not be more alien to them. Right. Like,
right.
And it like it's crazy. It's like it's been some version of legal on the West Coast for 20 or 25 years, literally. Right. And it's like it is the craziest thing ever. And it's really bizarre to be in, one country that has such different climates.
Yeah. And, just one more riff on that. So I'm going to shout out Brooke Bergstaller. She's been on the podcast. She's in California, big cannabis advocate, influencer online. And we actually did a Clubhouse one time when Clubhouse was really booming. I don't even know if it's hot anymore.
Back in their moment.
Yeah, back in their like their 1 month heyday, But so we had this Clubhouse. We were talking about cannabis in your state, I think was the title, and there were a lot of Texas people that joined. And I think that, I don't want to speak for Brooke, but I know that in some cases she was like, wow, because she's just lived in California. It's the culture there, right? It's normalized. And, people in Texas were talking about Delta 8 and,
Right.
right, CBD, and it was just so different, so it's true. It really is. And I think that conversations like these kind of help, because people that may be on the outsides or in states where it's not as friendly, at least they get a purview into what it could be like, or
Yeah.
what it's like in other areas. So,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. So let me ask you this, because you say there's a big opportunity for the smaller players to enter into the cannabis industry, what would be, your initial advice for someone wanting to do so?
Yeah. So, I mean, to clarify, I don't know about opportunity. I think there's room for it, and I'm continually impressed by it.
Yeah.
I think it's an awful. Uh, I wouldn't. Uh, I wouldn't advise anyone to do it. I think it's brutally competitive. Without going up against folks that have a bunch of money or have way bigger buying power. It's a brutally competitive space, especially out west where there's open licensing. For context, Oregon had something like 1,200 producers licensed at the outset of recreational, and there's only a few million people here.
Right.
It's really crazy, right? So it's brutally competitive, and I think pretty consistently, I get the question a lot. My advice is don't. My advice is my advice is start
You were sounding so encouraging earlier, man.
No, it's like that being said, the big opportunity in weed. If I was fired up about getting into the cannabis industry and not already doing something, I would be doing a service business niched into the cannabis.
Right. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Like it's just too easy. Like
accounting, sales, marketing, like
construction, like security,
yeah.
like any of these things. It's too easy, and there's immediate cash flow, and it doesn't matter how competitive the industry gets. They still got to pay their accountant or pay for the build out of their grow or whatever it is.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And I've had conversations with this actually with others on this podcast, and it might have been offline, not when we were recording, but one gentleman said like, people like, he's surprised at the feedback when we talk about that, like accounting and just basic services that any business operator would need in any industry. And some people would tell him like, well, why would they need that? Why would they? And it's because the industry is still legitimizing, right? Due to prohibition, and it's not, in some people's eyes, it's still illicit. It's still in the illicit market. So you're totally right. Once the floodgates open, it's just going to be something that's going to be needed.
Yeah. I mean, there's rampant. A good example of that is a security installer, right?
Right.
Imagine you get a security installer that you don't have to explain the rules to. How much time is saved? How much time and energy is saved by not having to go, here's how compliance works. Here's what I need, right? They walk in, they know, because that's what they do. Huge value to that. And all of those businesses are like simple cash flow positive businesses. Not all of them, plenty of them. Plenty ones of them I would choose. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Well, like I mentioned earlier, we have, the cannabis community within Twitter is growing every day, and everyone is really just utilizing their voices to advocate and educate, right? And reach out to our policymakers. And so I want to field, there was some questions that came in when I promoted this episode. One came from Chris Grisolia. How can an advocate like me with over 30 years of business management experience get a job in management in the cannabis industry?
Yeah. So the good news is that none of this is any different from every other industry at that type of level. Kick the door down and get the job, right? Like get on LinkedIn, get on Indeed. There are job listings for this kind of thing for in the space, and go get the job. That's another question I get all the time. And it's like, the same answer to anything. Just go get it.
Yeah, dust off that resume. The hardest part may be like the stigma that that you're fearful of, like from maybe coworkers in different industries. I know that was one thing coming out of the cannabis closet initially, when I had over 6 years of corporate corporate America experience. But once you do it, it doesn't matter. Like people don't really care. It's something that, it's almost like you're almost in your head too much, is what I would say to that.
Yeah. And to tack on to it, like if you look at a dispensary, dispensaries aren't cannabis businesses, they're retail businesses.
Right. That's absolutely right.
someone with a bunch of retail experience is probably much better suited to go and pick up cannabis knowledge and run retail than someone with a bunch of cannabis knowledge to go and pick up retail. Right. Yeah.
Very, very good point. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. The other question that came in was from Cold Case. This is a great question. What should future entrepreneurs be working on now so the process can be smoother when it does become legal in their state? So this could be like going back to what you were saying about the ancillary services that are needed. Like say an entrepreneur wanted to freelance those services or launch a business that had niche services to offer, operators in the industry.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them so that it makes their life easier now in preparation of federal legalization?
Yeah. This may be overly tactical, but SEO. I would go and blog about,
Smart.
Cannabis Marketing Texas, so that by the time that, there's dispensaries in Texas searching for marketing help, it's there's only one place to go. That may be overly specific. On the like licensed business front, like I think a lot of the time it gets overcomplicated. Prepare to go and read lengthy code isn't the right word. Go read the rules, right? If you've ever read a technical document, great. If you haven't, go read some really obnoxious textbook, because that's what it's going to be like when it's time to go and understand what you need to get a license for X, right? It's really just like I tell people often, the application processes are always pretty much boiled down to a checklist. Some longer, some shorter, but it's a checklist. So there's not all that much to do to prepare besides be a little diligent and detail oriented.
And that really, I mean, like when you're thinking about the regulatory framework in your given state, like to your point, you could just Google that stuff and put together a checklist of what you would need to do to obtain a license or whatever you'd need, right?
Yep, absolutely. And, looking at other states that have gone is probably a decent reference point.
Right.
We know it won't be the same, but probably some similar elements.
Yeah. And I really like your point about SEO. In fact, I think that there's already some media entities that are doing that here in Texas. I mean, because the hemp community is very big in Texas, right? But, of course, they're doing this also in preparation for legalization in the state as well in the future.
Yep. I know a couple of groups that are doing that in Texas, just getting a foothold so that when the time comes, they've got THC channels ready to rock.
Yep. Shout out to Texas Cannabis Collective. Right on, man. Well, hey, I wanna, as we wrap up, I want to give you the floor. What is top of mind for you? What do you want to leave the audience with? The floor is yours.
Man, that's a tricky one. I would love to have you all join me on Twitter. I talk about cannabis, like Kevin mentioned. I also talk about just building things and business in general. For me, cannabis is like, I'm blown away by the plant. I'm super in this and I love it. At the end of the day, it's kind of a vehicle for my building and entrepreneurial energy. And so that's a lot of what we do on Twitter. And I think that's really all I've got to say, man. I think cannabis brands for people that use weed, and follow me on Twitter, Landforce, Landforce, just like my last name. That's kind of all I got to say. I'm not a complicated guy.
I love it. Straightforward and to the point.
Yep.
And I'm really looking forward to when y'all go public. I'll definitely be following that and want to have you back on after that time so that, you can talk about where the company's at and kind of what you're looking forward to at that point in time. So
great. Yep.
Awesome, Colin. Well, we'll continue to banter back and forth on Twitter. Keep spreading the good word, my man. We appreciate all that you do.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.